Arthur, does it help to have someone to talk to?
My mother always tells me to smile and put on a happy face. She told me I had a purpose to bring laughter and joy to the world. Hey, stop them! Is it just me? Or is it getting crazier out there?
Smile, though your heart is aching. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by.
What?
If you smile to your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll find that life is still worthwhile. If you
What's so funny?
just
Freak!
Gotham has lost its way. What kind of coward would do something that cold-blooded? Someone who hides behind a mask.
I used to think that my life was a tragedy. But now I realize it's a comedy.
if you just smile.
So Arthur is a man who appears to be in his sort of 40s actually, and he's living at home with his mum. And you know, it's clear that actually he's not been somebody who has had a particularly lucky life. And at the beginning of the film, what we know about him is that he's obviously seeing somebody psychologically, that he's getting help, that he's been on meds, and we know that he's going to pharmacies to pick up medication. And also that he is beginning to show symptoms of the fact that he lives almost in a fantasy world. We see him settle down with his mother to watch the Murray Show, which is a show that later in the film he actually ends up going on to, which becomes like the pinnacle moment for his life of being something that he's fantasized about for a long time, and actually he finally gets there, which is amazing for Arthur. Now, during this period of time, he's watching this program for the Murray Show with his mother, and we see Arthur fantasizing himself being in the audience, and there's a really tender moment that happens where he calls out to the host of the show, played by Robert De Niro, that he loves him. And Robert De Niro says at this moment in character, he pulls up the lights and he says, like, "Was that you, young man, who said that?" And this is this moment for the first time in kind of like the film, certainly, that Arthur feels like he's being seen, and he feels like he's being recognized. Now, Arthur has an archetype of being somebody who's incredibly wounded.
But in all seriousness, I mean, these
I
lads
love you,
are...
Murray!
I love you, too. Hey, Bobby, will you put the lights on? Who was that? Was that you? You want to stand up, please? Stand up, please. Go ahead. What's your name?
Hi, Murray. Arthur.
Arthur.
My name's Arthur.
Oh, okay. Well, there's something special about you, Arthur, I could tell. Where you from?
I live right here in the city with my mother.
Okay, hold on. There's nothing funny about that. I lived with my mother before I made it. Just me and her. I'm that kid whose father went out for a pack of cigarettes, and he never came back.
I know what that's like, Murray. I've been the man of the house for as long as I can remember. I take good care of my mother.
All that sacrifice, she must love you very much.
She does. She always tells me to smile and put on a happy face. She says I was put here to spread joy and laughter.
I like that. I like that a lot. Come on down. Come on. For that, you gotta come down. Come on. Come on. Okay, we got a big show tonight. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
That was great, Arthur. Thank you. I mean, I loved hearing what you had to say. It made my day.
Thanks, Murray.
You see all this, the lights, the show, the audience, all that stuff. I'd give it all up in a heartbeat to have a kid like you.
Fantasy, he's in the audience of the Murray show, and Murray asks him to stand up after he's called out, "I love you." And this is an odd moment for him, where he is able for the first time to kind of like get across what he wants to say. And interesting, what Arthur wants to talk about is actually that he is somebody that he wants to make people happy, that his mother has said that he had been born to bring light and happiness to the world. And this is an opportunity in his fantasy where Murray actually asks Arthur to come down on stage. And Arthur has a moment with Murray where he hugs him, and where Murray says to him that he wishes that he'd had a son like him. And this is the beginning into the need, the intrinsic need that Arthur has to want to be loved and to want to be recognized as somebody who is worth having around. And for Arthur, he lives with his mother, he hasn't got a father, he's not met his father, and he doesn't know his father. And actually this comes, becomes part of the story later in the film. But Arthur has this absolute desire and love for a strong male role model, and he sees Murray as that. And Murray is somebody that, as a celebrity, that is part of his life on a regular basis, where he sits and lies with his mother and watches this character. And in his fantasy, Arthur is imagining Murray telling him that he loves him back and that he would wish he had had a son like him. And this demonstrates actually how broken Arthur is and how much Arthur wants to be loved. And this is something that, he, without the strong role model, Arthur is grasping onto role models where he can find them. And this is where he's open to celebrities. And actually something that's interesting about Arthur is that, he's got this fantastical side of his mind where his life is so dire and so desperate that actually what he does as a coping strategy for that is he falls back into his imagination and imagines a world which is different to the one that he lives in as a way of coping. Imagines a world where he is loved, where he's lovable, where he's recognized. And something that, when looking back at the book that he had, his psychiatrist had, above the joke, what it said was, imagine dying in the middle of the street and people not recognizing you so much that they're stepping over you. Everything that Arthur does comes from a point of wanting to be loved and recognized. His job, he goes out to make people laugh. He wants to be a clown. The whole reason why he does these things is because he wants to be recognized and he wants to be loved. And ironically, the job that he's taken up as being a sign holder is somebody that is just ignored on a daily basis, which just compounds the psychological and emotional feelings that Arthur has.
How's the comedy career? Are you a famous stand-up yet?
Not quite. Just been working on my material.
No, don't say it. This will be quick. Look, I like you, Arthur. A lot of the guys, they think you're a freak, but I like you. I don't even know why I like you. But I got another complaint. It's starting to piss me off. Kenny's music. The guy said you disappeared. Never even returned his sign.
Because I got jumped. Didn't you hear?
For a sign? This bullshit. It doesn't even make sense. Just give him his sign back. He's going out of business, for God's sake, Arthur.
Why would I keep his sign?
How the fuck do I know? Why does anybody do anything? If you don't return the sign, I gotta take it out of your paycheck. Are we clear?
Even in his job, he's somebody that people just walk on by. Now, we see in the beginning where he is in the office with his psychiatrist that in the book, she looks at a word, and the joke is, I hope that my death makes more sense than my life. And he says sense as in, as in pennies, like cents, C-E-N-T-S, which is, a play on words, which is quite interesting, really. He feels like that there's going to be more value to his death. He hopes there's more value to it because he is so undervalued in society that he's not even looking at dollars, he's looking at cents.
And using it as a journal, but also as a joke diary. Funny thoughts or observations. I think I told you I'm pursuing a career in stand-up comedy.
No, you didn't.
I think I did.
I just hope my death makes more sense than my life.
So we see Arthur's need for fantasy continue, actually. And at one point he goes into an elevator, and a woman that lives in his same building says to him, and strikes up a conversation just with a very brief comment. She says what a crappy building it is that they live in. And she's got a daughter with her, and it's when the elevator stops. And something that's quite interesting is that there's a woman with her young child there. She doesn't feel at that point that Arthur is anything to be fearful of. Arthur doesn't come across as somebody who is confrontational or aggressive, or even as somebody who's odd and bizarre and doesn't, people don't want to be around him. The elevator breaks down. They're in the elevator together, just the three of them. A young woman and her child and a man. And at no point does she feel fearful. She actually makes a comment to him about how bad the building is that they live in, and Arthur kind of just looks at her, and then she makes this kind of a movement where she shoots herself, ironically, to kind of say, oh God, I just kill myself. This life is so bad. And Arthur really holds on to this and actually finds this is something that he can kind of extend into being something humorous. Now, Arthur's got a fascination with death because of the fact that he is so unhappy. He feels almost like that is an opportunity for him to be released. A lot of people see suicide as being a release. It's not something that's frightening when they're dealing with depression and anxiety and psychological problems and the level of trauma that Arthur's been through. For him, suicide is looked at as being a relief. And so for this woman who he's not met before to kind of make this connection between, a suicidal action as a joke that becomes something between them, he takes that as being something more than what it is. For the woman, it's just a jovial act, whereas for him, it's something that he becomes attached to her through.
This building is so awful, isn't it?
This building's so awful, right, Mommy?
Yes, we can hear you, Gigi.
It's so awful, Mommy. Right, Mommy? This building's so awful, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Hey.
You know, we see this fantasy world continuing where he imagines the young woman who's been in the elevator with him as being his counterpart, as being the support there for him. And we see throughout the film her being in, you know, really important moments, like when his mother's taken into hospital. We see her sat behind him. You know, he's having moments of stress and anxiety and upset. We see her there with him. And actually, this is not real. You know, this is a fantasy that's happening inside Arthur's head. And so we see this level of psychiatric kind of retreat from reality that Arthur uses as a way of escapism. You know, the fantasy is a way of escaping, and actually, because he doesn't have the love and the desire and, you know, the romantic relationships and people that back him up and support him, he imagines that support in his real life, as opposed to actually accessing that. And that's the most devastating thing for Arthur, because actually Arthur really desperately needs somebody that backs up and loves him, and he hasn't got that in his real life. Even his mother, he is taking care of. Instead of her being there for him as somebody that loves him and supports him as a mother should a child. The first time that we see Arthur actually commit a crime or do anything that is outwardly sort of demonstrative of him having that psychopathic tendency is when he's on a train home, and there's a few guys who are kind of typical kind of you know, they're Wall Street guys that we learn of later in the film. So actually they're those kind of suited and booted kind of types, and they are mocking and being quite sort of aggressive, but in a passive way towards a single woman on a train and, you know, on a subway. And actually this is terrifying. If you're a woman on your own in a train late at night and you've got three guys that are being jovial with you, even if they think they're just being funny or whatever, it isn't funny. It's not funny ever for a lone woman to have three guys going at her for whatever reason. You know, it's never big, it's never clever. Guys, if you do this and you think you're being funny, or you think that you're being comedic, or you're being friendly, you're not being friendly, you're terrifying the woman. Leave her alone. So, you know, we see this, and interestingly, you know, this moment that actually sees Arthur be able to break out of his character of being somebody who is beaten down is actually almost an opportunity for him to be a white knight. You know, this woman is having to deal with these idiots, these three idiots, and she's obviously not comfortable. And Arthur suddenly starts to laugh. Now, Arthur's got this condition from being, you know, having a neurological issue because he's been beaten in his life. And so he's had, you know, neurological degeneration that has been caused from abuse and violence. And this has caused him to have sporadic and uncontrollable laughter, which is the biggest kicker of the whole thing, really, for Arthur, because he is so unhappy, and yet the sick irony of his whole character and of his whole life is that through the abuse and the violence that he suffered as a child, he's now enforced through his own biology and neurology to be somebody that laughs whether he likes it or not. And this is, for me, I find this absolutely heartbreaking. And to be honest, as somebody that's grown up, not with the level of trauma and violence that Arthur's grown up with, but as somebody that I do understand a lot of the things that Arthur have been through, and it's a very much a knife edge, a very sharp knife edge that people walk with trauma. You know, you can either become the abuser, or you can become somebody that fixes themselves, or commit suicide. You know, there's these three kind of pathways, and unfortunately, you know, Arthur is tipped over the edge to become the abuser. And in this moment, he comes almost as this white knight to rescue this woman, inadvertently, but certainly he's playing within that archetype. And he starts laughing through his own kind of neurological condition, and the men take notice of him instead of the woman that they were originally bothering.
Wait, Brian, am I crazy? Tell him what you saw.
Hey, you want some French fries? Hello? Talking to you, hey?
No, thank you.
Sure? Real good.
being nice to you.
Is something funny, asshole?
Bothering. And Arthur is in his clown outfit, and so he's just an easy picking for these three guys. And unfortunately, the three guys start to become really violent towards him. And Arthur has dealt with violence all of his life. Since he was a small boy, people have been violent towards him. He has been abused and beaten throughout the film. You know, and I think that when you look at it from that perspective, the fact that Arthur is so damaged and so abused, he has so many levels of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, of behavioural issues, of neurological issues, of, you know, so many complex issues in the fact that, you know, he's his mother's carer, that his mother doesn't love him the way he should, that he hasn't got a male role model, he hasn't got a friend, he hasn't got a life, his job is just, you know, hopeless. Everything in his life just spirals out of control into this great void and abyss of misery and negativity. In this moment when he is beaten again in his life, he snaps. And it is only by the sheer luck and like misery of that moment that somebody gave Arthur a gun just prior to this, that Arthur has got the gun that he can pull out and shoot the guy. And this is the beginning of all of the kind of psychopathy and all of the criminal activity in Arthur's life. And I would say that if that gun had never been given to Arthur, Arthur would never have become the Joker, because he would never have been in that incident where he was pushed too far, where he took three guys' lives in the end, and this triggered something in him that actually he suddenly felt that he had power back in his life. And I think that, I mean, I don't know about other people, maybe I'm just as mad as he is, but I can completely understand where he's coming from, and I can completely empathize with where he's coming from. You know, if you've been abused to that level, it's completely understandable why at some point you would attempt to reclaim your power back. And unfortunately, in this moment, in that snap decision, Arthur makes a very devastating but a completely understandable decision and choice. So he shoots these three people, and that's the beginning. That's the beginning of the Joker. In that moment, he begins to be the actual character and the caricature that we see as the Joker. That is the birth point to my mind. And I think that actually if he hadn't have had that kind of, you know, just chance happening, that he was given that gun and this process then began, I don't think that Arthur would ever have become the Joker. I don't think the Joker would ever have been birthed. I think what would have happened actually more than likely is that Arthur would have committed suicide, and that would have been the end. And I think for all of the Joker's psychopathy and failure, I'm bloody glad that Arthur managed to get some of his power back and actually managed to continue his life doing some of the things that did finally make him happy, even for the detriment of Gotham City and the detriment of Harley and every other person that unfortunately the Joker had met. But the Joker from there on in did actually manage to have a life that was filled with some sort of reclamation of joy and some form of, like, you know, finding something that was powerful and potent that he wasn't able to find without the Joker, you know. And I think that Arthur deserved that, you know. I think that Arthur deserved to find something, and luckily that, you know, it's a film, so we can kind of say that, but I think that Arthur deserved to find something that made him happy, and if the Joker was that, then good for him.
Can I help you, pal?
I don't know what to say.
Do you want an autograph or something?
No. My name is Arthur. Penny Fleck is my mother.
Jesus. You're the guy that came to my house yesterday.
Yes. I'm sorry, I just showed up, but my mother told me everything, and I had to talk to you.
Look, pal, I'm not your father. What's wrong with you?
Look at us. I think you are.
Well, that's impossible. Because you're adopted, and I never slept with your mother. What do you want from me, money?
No, I wasn't adopted.
Jesus, she never told you?
Told me what?
Your mother adopted you while she was working for us.
That's not true. Why are you saying that?
That she was arrested and committed to Arkham State Hospital when you were just a little boy.
Why are you saying this? I don't need you to tell me lies. I know it seems strange. I don't mean to make you uncomfortable. I don't know why everyone is so rude. I don't know why you are. I don't want anything from you. Maybe a little bit of warmth. Maybe a hug, Dad. How about just a little bit of fucking decency? What is it with you people? You say that stuff to my mother?
She's crazy.
She's...
You think this is funny?
Dad, it's me.
Touch my son again, I'll fucking kill you.
So we see Arthur's reclamation of power go on when he kills his mother. And this is, again, another massive statement of the ending of Arthur, almost. You know, with the death of his mother, actually ends Arthur's life and his childhood. We almost see that this is the opportunity for Arthur to close a book on what has happened prior to his life. And the reason why he kills his mother is he finally finds out actually what has happened in his childhood. And you know, Arthur, when people go through very, very severe levels of trauma and severe levels of torment, they compartmentalize memories, and actually the mind splits and blocks off parts of memory, history, even personalities at points in severe trauma, and you can see people get kind of split personality disorder through trauma, and this is a way for your psychological you know, ability to cope. And I think that, you know, in this opportunity where Arthur went back and actually found out what happened, his brain wasn't ready for it. These memories were compartmentalized, and he suddenly kind of opened up his mother's medical records, and by doing that he opened up this box in his mind that released these demons inside of him, and this absolute rage, because he suddenly remembered from this perspective of a child, but also looking at this and understanding this in an adult, how horrendous his childhood was and how horrific some of the things that happened to him, with the complacency and not necessarily always being complicit in it, but being complicit through complacency and through her own mental health issues. His mother allowed him to be abused by boyfriends, and she did nothing about it, you know. And we learned that at one point Arthur was found, you know, tied to a radiator as a young boy, and he's been beaten. And I think that if you have the humanity to understand actually what some people have been through, this causes them to be the way that they are. And this is why I say a lot in my podcast that hurt people, and that it's important that people fix their problems and end those abuse cycles, because otherwise the abuse cycles are passed on to the next generation. And we see this really clearly with Arthur's mother. You know, his mother hasn't fixed her problems, and so what she's done is pass it on to Arthur, and now Arthur, like a great big bloody firework, explodes all over the city of Gotham and really royally, you know, mucks shit up. Bless him. But good for him. Good on him.
I always hated that name. You know, he used to tell me that my laugh was a condition, that there was something wrong with me. There isn't. That's the real me. Happy. I haven't been happy 1 minute of my entire fucking life. You know what's funny? You know what really makes me laugh? I used to think that my life was a tragedy. But now I realize it's a fucking comedy.
I actually really like Arthur. I really identify with a lot of Arthur's kind of things that he'd been through in his life, and I think that, as I was saying before, you know, it is a knife edge. I think that people can be pushed, and Arthur's been pushed to the limits of his capacity of being able to deal with things in a normal human way, and this is why he's suddenly broached onto the sort of sides of psychopathy. And I think if people are truly honest with themselves, actually we have all of these sides and all of these parts and archetypes within us, and it only takes that thing that's going to knock you over that can actually turn you from being somebody who's peaceful and quiet, or whatever you want to kind of identify with, to being actually somebody that is just as dangerous and just as terrifying as the Joker.